We got weapon tuning, we got weapon buffs, we got a couple of nerfs, we got some thoughts on some things, but not really on some others. It's a TWAB video. Sit down, shut up, let's talk. Alright, we technically also have some trials notes. Bungie is bringing back Capture Zone trials this week, but it's going to be on Endless Vale. And instead of putting the zones on the side of the team that just lost, they're going to be at neutral sites every time. I feel like a lot of people were anticipating this to be the way it was going to be originally when the idea was thrown out there, but now it's a reality, so we'll see how it goes. I would imagine I would enjoy this more than having to fight people in their own spawn, but I'm probably not going to be playing Trials this week because Endless Vale, with all of its tight corridors and whatnot, feels like one of the best Shatter Dive maps in the game, and Shatter Dive is quite literally a game-ruining thing for me right now in PvP, so have fun in Trials this week, you absolute maniacs. Okay. Guns. We got the 30th anniversary patch coming up in December, and with it are a lot of weapon tweaks. Shotguns. Slugs are the dominant PvE choice by a pretty wide margin when it comes to pumping out damage, not to mention are good against 2 raid bosses, so Bungie's trying to balance the scales here by reducing the slug shotgun PvE damage bonus from 30% to 20%, and then they gave pellet shotguns a 10% PvE damage boost. Still feels like slugs are going to be the go-to option for these situations. The gap's definitely tighter, but I still think slugs are going to be the play, just maybe not as strong of a pick. However, I don't really feel like we're going to feel the effect of this until particle deconstruction goes away in February. Linear fusions are getting buffed. Yeah, you heard that right. Linear fusions getting buffed. It seems crazy, but that's because of particle deconstruction skewing our perspective. Linear fusions without particle simply aren't as good compared to some other easier options, so Bungie is buffing their damage by 10% in PvE. You know, no complaints from me. This season just got even easier. We'll see how it works out in Season 16. Caster Swords. The ammo cost of the heavy attack was reduced from 8 to now 5. This is a great change in my opinion. Most people aren't really running caster swords in PvE because of the high cost, and because it's just easier to spam left click a whole lot and kill things or spin to win with falling guillotine. Great change here. Great change. Bows are getting another buff. 10% damage boost in PvE versus rank and file enemies. No complaints from me here. It's just going to make bows even better in endgame content. Sidearms and fusions were actually non-hit scan because of, quote, an ancient data entry error, end quote. I'm just going to quote Bungie in full on this one. Quote, behind the scenes, the engine does math converting a projectile from non-hit scan to hit scan if it would cover a specific distance in one frame. So this would only occur running at 60 FPS or higher. Shout out to a specific community that provided us with evidence on this issue. You know who you are, end quote. Maybe sidearms won't be all dog anymore. I doubt it, but we'll see. Okay. Exotics. Vex Mythoclast. We knew a nerf was coming. This one is mainly hitting the gun in PvP, where I believe they said they were going to hit it, although it does have some minor PvE implications. Reduced aim assist by 25, reduced the linear mode aim assist cone scaler from 1.1 to 1.05, and it now requires 3 kills in PvP to get the full overcharge to go into linear fusion mode. Now, I'm on the side of Vex Mythoclast being absolutely nuts in PvP, so these changes seem totally fine to me. The linear mode was basically free kills, very loose headshot requirements. Now you need to actually aim the thing a bit more to get headshots and headshot kills. Headshots in general aren't going to be as free anymore. So, yeah, I think this is fine. PvE, it's going to be fine, but I think Vex needed to come down a smidge in PvP. Fighting Lion. Oh boy, a lot of stuff here. I'm not a Fighting Lion user, nor have I really seen it used that much in PvP, despite how annoying special ammo GLs are. So I don't have a ton of experience with this gun and this situation, but here's what's happening. Removed multi-hit requirement to get the buff to increase your reload speed. The reload speed boost is now plus 70 versus plus 50, and the buff duration is now 7 seconds. Do with that information what you will, fighting line users. Sounds like a buff. Again, I don't feel very qualified to speak on this gun as I have not used it in a very long time. Arbalest gets anti-barrier intrinsically. Very, very nice. This is going to be an interesting alternate exotic option to Ariana's Vow going into future seasons, especially with Disruption Break, considering that their DPS, Ariana's Vow and Arbalest, are very, very similar. Sleeper Sim is getting yet another buff. Mag size is going from 3 to 4, and PvE damage was increased by 6%. This buff is trying to push Sleeper Sim just a little bit higher, just a little bit maybe over legendary linear fusions to make it actually worth using over said linear fusions like Threaded Needle if you wanted to commit your exotic slot to it. This also gets the 10% linear fusion buff mentioned earlier. Sleeper, we're all pulling for you. Please be good. Suros's dual mode receiver mode now gives plus 30 range and plus 3 zoom. Dual mode just made Suros into a not good 360 RPM auto. Bungie is trying to fix that with some stats. Would love to see Suros get a little bit more attention again. Cryosthesia 77k. This gun was intentionally brought into the game as an underperformer due to how the community was reacting to stasis at the time, which I do think was a good move, although it did put a damper on that seasonal weapon kind of hype. Now that things are easing up with stasis, Bungie is looking to make it, how do I say this? Not complete garbage. No more variable trigger, so the gun shoots when you press the trigger, not when released. Charged shot is now a special reload, so you get a kill and then you can do the special reload. The charged shot no longer costs your entire magazine, so you can just go back to shooting after you use that charged shot. And the charged shot now causes an AoE, which freezes in PvE and slows players in PvP. Considering the absolute insanity that Ager's Scepter is, this was definitely due for some sort of buff, especially being a sidearm. This gun is going to be much more enjoyable to use without variable trigger, and with that AoE freeze for PvE, nice alternate option to Ager's Scepter. Ager's is still bonkers, so we're going to need to see how much use this actually gets with it being a sidearm and with Ager's being the gun that it is. Leviathan's Breath is now getting Archer's Tempo on its Catalyst in addition to its other effects. I still don't think anyone's touching this thing with Unstoppable Fusion around. Let's talk in Season 16 if we really need to. Whisper of the Worm is trying to make a comeback. Whispered Breathing proc delay from the Catalyst was reduced from 2.1 to 1.2 seconds. White Nail is now pulling 2 bullets from your inventory and 1 from thin air as opposed to all 3 from your inventory, and PvE damage was increased by 10%. The Whispered Breathing proc buff was made because it just took too long to proc during shorter damage phases, so by the time you could finally get rolling, you probably just had to move on to something else. White Nail giving a little more sustain is awesome. You can stay in the fray a little bit longer, pulling ammo from thin air, and I'll always take a PvE damage boost. I don't know about this season, but Season 16, assuming there isn't another Omega gun mod in the seasonal artifact, we'll see. We'll see about its return. DARCI. Yeah, DARCI. It's happening. It's finally getting a buff. Reduced flinch, recoil, and accuracy degradation by 50% while personal assistant is active. PA now has a 1-second delay before deactivating. It used to be instant, and a 20% PvE damage bonus. This is going to make PA much more reasonable and less obnoxious. Having that buff instantly fall off was kind of a pain in the ass. We'll have to do some damage comparisons versus Whisper to see what's up. Actually, kind of excited for that. DARCI might end up being, the go-to for shorter burst windows. Malfeasance explosion damage increased by 50%. Wow. Yeah, we'll check that out. Deadman's is getting some tuning that should hopefully make it more enticing to controller players, despite the fact that the buffs that it's getting technically affect all platforms. Less recoil and improved accuracy aren't as effective buffs on mouse and keyboard, and increased reticle friction fall-off distance has no effect for mouse and keyboard, but it does for controller. Heir Apparent Catalyst. Shield nerf reduced damage resistance against players from 75 to now 25. Don't think much needs to be said there. The 75% reduction was a data error. Screw this shield. It should be easier to fight people now, you effing cheese lords who are using this in PvP. Shame on you. I'm shaming you. Shame on you. Lorentz driver. They're removing the ability energy from picking up a telemetry pattern because the gun is already really good. Okay. I guess that's okay. I wasn't really paying attention that much to the ability energy portion of this gun because I just wasn't really focused too hard on picking up telemetries this season because the gun is just so good on its own with particle deconstruction. So, I mean, okay. I'm not really the most bent out of shape about that. Traveler's Chosen Sidearm is getting nerfed. Reduced stacks granted on a Guardian defeat from 3 to 2, and now gives 10% ability energy per stack on activation. It was previously more generous on low stacks, less on higher. The average and the amount for 10 stacks is unchanged. So why is this getting a nerf? Well, we're going to have another TWAB soon that talks about abilities, and Traveler's Chosen was apparently getting around some of those changes, so this is a tweak to the gun so that things don't break, I guess. Perks. Let's talk about perks. Adrenaline Junkie. Eliminations with the weapon can add single damage stacks or extend existing ones. Grenade eliminations boost the stacks to 5x immediately and lowered the duration to compensate for weapon activation. So instead of needing grenade kills to proc the effect, this basically sounds like Swashbuckler, but instead of melee, it's grenade. I mean, okay. Swash, it's not terrible, and grenades are much more usable in endgame content than melees are, so I guess I'm on board. Although, I feel like I would have been on board for almost anything they did to this perk. I don't know if it's getting thrown into the Omega top tier, but I'm at least a little more interested now. Vorpal Weapon is getting a nerf on power weapons, but a buff on primary weapons. 10% bonus damage now on power weapons. It stays 15 on special and is now 20% on primary weapons. Vorpal was pretty much a non-choice most of the time. You're mainly using your power ammo on bosses. It made taking other perks a less good idea. But now with primaries getting a little bit more of a benefit, you can have some extra strength against bosses. Yeah, I'm fine with this change. Whirlwind Blade now requires 10 stacks instead of 5. This makes it not as good for shorter duration fights, but I still think it's going to be a go-to perk, just not as good now. Pulse Monitor now procs when you dip below 30% shield as opposed to 90% health. That's actually pretty good. It's going to proc way more often now. The perk auto-reloads you and gives increased handling even if you don't have the gun out. Kind of a sleeper perk. Might get a little more attention now. Keep tabs on it. All right, almost done. Mods, Quick Access Sling, mainly being used on bows, breach GLs, and that's it. And Bungie's trying to make it so this mod is a little more universal, but they might revisit it in a later patch. It'll now give 0.9 times ready/stow time all of the time, when it previously gave plus 100 handling, 0.9 times ready/stow/aim down sights time for 0.4 seconds after running out of ammo. This also applies to the swap mag perk. English, please. Full Auto Retrofit is a stopgap for a change coming in the Witch Queen with regards to accessibility. Basically giving people who have physical issues with hitting the fire button on a controller or a mouse or whatever you're using, the ability to just fire a non-full auto weapon in full auto at their rate of fire. This mod is coming on hand cannons, sidearms, scouts, pulses, stuff where you gotta like mash the button a whole lot. Should not have an impact on gameplay whatsoever, and it's unlocked by default for everyone. So this is just kind of a change that is gonna affect those people who can't really, mash the button. Future stuff. Bungie doesn't like that the main desire for catalysts is the orb generation that they give. So they're going to look at stuff to let players build around that limitation. Totally get that. There are definitely some catalysts that are really, really good, but just being able to make orbs to proc whatever you want to do or just get more super is easily the most useful thing to all players across all exotics. Detaching that ability to make orbs might be a good idea. Weapon differentiation, aka a reason to care about two similar guns. Bungie gives an example. If I have two Void adaptive hand cannons, one from a raid and one from Suros, why do I care about one more than the other? The stats are close, the perks are probably comparable. Bungie is working on something for Witch Queen to try to get people to care. Bungie still is not done with special ammo economy in PvP, and they have another tweak coming that should bring down the amount of ammo. Next, quote, exotic primary weapons already advance ammo finder mods much faster, but we want them to feel better in hard PvE content and are adjusting all of them to reach this goal, end quote. AKA Bungie wants people to use exotic primaries more in the endgame. The change that they made wasn't enough, so they're gonna try to do even more. Totally on board with that. Would love to start using exotic primaries again. And finally, Bungie is adjusting some exotics, some that, quote, consistently top the PvP usage charts in an oppressive way. Some that had their perks limited to a degree that's no longer warranted. We're looking at you, Chaperone, end quote. I think a lot of people are hoping for some last word on controller nerfs, looking for that to be hit as well, but we'll see what Bungie comes up with there. Okay, we're done. Talk it out in the comments how you guys feeling about this stuff. Nothing really absolutely shocked me, but I was pleasantly surprised by some of the exotic, sniper buffs, especially for DARCI. Great stuff for DARCI, but otherwise I think everything here is pretty reasonable, and we still have more on the way. Bungie said that they're going to be talking about ability changes in a future TWAB, like the Shatter Dive nerf, and I honestly don't care about anything else right now. Shatter Dive can just eat my entire ass. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.